Welcome to the Healing Collective Live, where we help you to heal physically, mentally, and spiritually. I have with me today Dr. Joy Krill. I'm so glad to have her, and she's here to talk about mental health and trauma. Here to talk about her fantastic book. This is fantastic. I tell you, what I've read so far in the book is just great. She talks about it's not meant to replace talk therapy or clinical therapy, but I can tell you from being a small group leader, this book would be fantastic for a small group workshop or women's group Bible study or whatever, because it's just that good. So, Dr. Joy, talk
Thank
to me.
you.
It really is good though, Joy. I'm serious. And even the what you have, the hope, the honest observation and practical execution, the way that you
Mhm.
have the book set up, you're very transparent with what happened in your life, but then you have these practical steps that one can take to help heal from different trauma. And speaking of trauma, I read in your book some of the stuff that you went through, and it was like bam, 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 bam. And you still managed to have this spirit about you that is just joyful, that is very calming for me, and just exciting. I mean, your spirit matches your name. You ever met someone who had a name like Faith, but then they're a doubter? Moment. I mean, your name is Joy and you exude this joyful spirit. So, but
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about what brought you to this place. Despite all that you've gone through, based on what I've read in your book, how do you still continue to have joy?
Ooh. So I'm gonna say this, and I put it. It's not always easy, but I will say it's a choice, right? Like
Okay.
I like to tell people, like you get to choose how you feel. Now that does not mean that there are times when things happen that make us feel yucky. However, we do get to say, "Hey, I want to feel differently." Now, when I say I want to feel differently, then I have to ask myself, what do I have to do to feel different? And then I have to do that thing, whatever that thing is. So yeah, I get to feel different, get to feel like this. I get to be happy. And in those times when I'm not, because of course I'm human and there are times and spaces when, happiness eludes us a little bit. But
Right.
in those times, it's like, okay, God, like, what can I do? Like, Lord, I need your joy. Right. And so, really, and I don't mean this in a cliche way, that song, this joy that I have, the world didn't give it to me. Like, the world didn't give it to me. And the world can't take it away. So, that's how I keep my joy is trying to stay grounded.
What was the catalyst that made you say, I can choose joy?
We all have a choice. The catalyst for me was recognizing the choice. And what do I mean by that? The reality of having a choice is null and void if we don't recognize that we have a choice. See, one of the things that people say, well, I didn't have a choice in the matter. There is always a choice. Now, it does not mean that it will always turn out the way that we want it to turn out. It doesn't mean that it's the optimal choice or whatever the case is. But I began to recognize that there was a choice. That was a game changer for me because one of the things that at one point there was a time in my life where I found myself like feeling put upon, like feeling like there wasn't a choice or feeling like I had no say in the matter. And what God began to show me, like, so I learned there is a choice, like, and we get to choose how we feel. And even when we have certain feelings that we don't like or that are not optimal for us, that they're not facts. So we get
Okay.
to adjust those. And so once I recognized that, I began to do things to work towards that. I began to do things towards
Okay.
what I wanted. Right. So one of the things that happens, particularly in situations when people have experienced certain traumas and things of that nature that they haven't gotten over. Now, don't get me wrong. As a therapist, I will tell you, like, trauma is very, very real. There are folks who experience traumas and then there are difficult times to get over it, or maybe they don't get over it, or whatever the case may be. However, there is a space in trauma to accept it or not. I believe that. However, it's a thin line, and it is one of those things where sometimes people have accepted it and don't realize that they've accepted or made an agreement with it, or whatever the case is. And so when we find ourselves accepting those things, we have to make sure that we don't get locked into them, right? Like, I can accept every trauma that I've been through. Because here's the difference. Okay, so for instance, let me give an example. I like to talk an analogy.
Mm-hmm.
If I was in a car accident, that could be a trauma,
Okay.
right? I'm in a car accident,
Right.
and that's trauma. As a result of being in a car accident, I could choose, I'm never going to drive again. Okay. If I choose to never drive again, then I've accepted trauma. Does that make sense? I've accepted the effects of trauma. Now, there are some folks that are like, well, I was just too scared, or I got behind the wheel. Okay, so let's dig into that. Let's dig into why you felt that fear, or what, did you think that it was going to happen again? What is the reality? What is the likelihood, right, of it happening again? So then we can dig deeply into the trauma. So I'm not here to say that trauma is not real. I'm just saying that trauma can be dealt with.
I want to make sure I heard you or understand you correctly. In accepting the trauma, we stay in the trauma, because if someone has had an accident, and of course it's a traumatic experience, and then they decided, I'm never going to get behind a wheel again, they're accepting the trauma.
They
Okay.
get locked in. And so here's the thing. And I don't want to say it as in like I'm to re-victimize a victim or anything like that. But
Right.
that's how we get locked into the place. And the reason I can say that is because there are people who've gotten into acts and decided, I'm getting back behind the wheel. I'm not going to let this accident take my freedom. Just like there are people who have gotten in accidents and said, I can't do it. Now, neither is, it's not a right or a wrong in it, but I am saying that there is an ability there to make a choice. And sometimes you have to dig a little deeper to be able to make that choice. So there are times when the traumas happen and people are affected by whatever they are affected by. But if they work on that process, then there can be healing in that space. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. But I guess I'm still stuck on the part about accepting the trauma. It kind of keeps you in the trauma. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
Oh, see, I was
When
thinking
we
accepting
accept
the
it,
trauma helps you to move forward from the trauma, but you're saying accepting the trauma can keep you right in that place, that traumatic place. You accept it as being real, or you accept it as being.
a different word that I would use instead of accepting it to move on would be acknowledging. Now, I can acknowledge a trauma.
Yeah,
I was
okay.
in it.
Okay.
It happened. Whatever. I didn't like it. I didn't want it to. That, I can acknowledge it so that I can move on. That's semantics. But I'm not. And that's why I said I don't want to blame anybody for being in trauma or having traumatic responses. Because, yeah, we can be in a trauma, or we can have traumatic responses and things of that nature. But we also can do the work to move through and pass trauma, in
Do
my
you
opinion.
believe that there's a complete healing of the trauma? Is there a way, or is it possible to move past that? Is it possible?
I would say it is possible to move through trauma. And I think that's the part in the acceptance space, because trauma is just that. It is those traumatic events, those things that happen. You'll see in my book where I talked about being with somebody on just a regular day. We were there on a regular day watching H.O.P.E, and she passed away, right? And what that meant I had to do was CPR, and all kinds of things happened. That was traumatic, right?
Was that
That
your
was
mom?
traumatic. And it could have stayed in it. It was one of my mother. It was definitely one of my mother figures, right? I
Okay,
called her
okay,
mother.
okay.
I called her mother.
Yes, okay, I see that. I was going to ask you about that.
hmm And so being in that space, that's a very traumatic event. Like again, that was not an
Mhm.
expected. I was there to do hair, nails, watch, shop, hang out, like just things that we do on a regular basis. And what? Like what? All of this, right? And it was that
Mhm.
snowball effect. Now, I could have been caught up in that, right?
Right.
However, like, I had to make some choices and had to do some work. I had to do some work behind that. Like, that didn't just like
Okay.
that didn't happen overnight. I had to do some work behind that. I had to ask myself some questions. I had to, have some therapists help me to do
Work
some
through it.
process through it. But also not accepting that I'm just gonna go into a depression and be in the depths of no, no, no. Like, what do I need to do to work through it? But it's because I recognize that there was an option. So when you ask me, do I believe that there is a place of complete healing? Absolutely. I believe that there's a place where you can experience, and I would call it complete healing, but also continuous healing. Because there are some things that we have to be healed from, you know, time and time again, or there might be something that comes up and there's a trigger. You're like, oh, I didn't even know that was there. And then I got to work on that trigger because something out of the blue may trigger that space. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. If we could go back to something you said when you were performing CPR on your mother, um, and then your father's death, and you're losing your sister, like you said, it didn't come to break you, but to make you more fully you. So how does that work? Because in my mind, I'm thinking those are some breaking
Yeah.
experiences. So how did
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
that make you fully you?
So for me, it made me press into who I am, who God has called me to be. Like, where can I go from here? Could it have broken me? Absolutely. Any one of those events could have broken me, right? If I
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
accepted them as breaking. But if I say, you know what, there's got to be more. And that is for me what hope is about. Whether you're at your highest high or your lowest low, that there's always more. And it for me that and not it for me that's a core belief. So if I believe that there's a core belief, even though those things happen, and they did, even though those things happened and they affected me, and they did, even though those things happened and I didn't want them to happen, and they did, I don't have to accept them as the end of me. I don't have to accept the trauma of them, even though I'm affected by the trauma of them. That's a word for somebody. Like, I
Say it again, Doctor.
I don't have to accept the trauma of them, even though I'm affected by the trauma of them. Right. And so, yes, there are traumatic situations, but I know that there's more. And since I know that there is more, what do I have to do to get to the more? And sometimes getting to the more is a fight of it. Sometimes getting through the trauma is a fight of it. And I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes it's easier. And this is not to say that somebody is taking the easy route because they're being affected by trauma, because no, you're being affected by trauma because you're being affected by trauma. But sometimes it is easier to stay in the trauma. It's comfortable. It's familiar. It makes sense. It would have made sense for me to remain depressed or have all of those kinds of things after any one of those situations. It would make sense. So that's not what I wanted. And I don't believe that was what God wanted for me either.
Now you talk about the fight being fixed because God promises all things to work for our good. So how did this conviction hold up during your trauma? And especially when you were performing CPR on your mother figure and losing your sister, were there times when your faith kind of wavered, or how did you navigate that place?
Oh, you asked me two questions. Okay. So how did I navigate that place? So for me, some of
Mhm.
my things were having to navigate things cognitive, like just having the knowing. Here's the thing: if I know if I get to the house, there's food for me there, and I'm outside and I'm hungry and I want to eat and all the things, but I know if I get to my house, there's food for me there. Even though I'm hungry and the hunger is driving me and I'm passing food places and I see other things and maybe even somebody offered me some food, but the thing that I'm supposed to eat, the thing that I want to eat is at my house, then there has to be that internal drive, that internal cognitive drive, right? It's just the knowing that it's there that drives. We got food at home. I ain't got to stop. I ain't got to spend no money. I ain't got to whatever. So because I know that, that's what drives me to that point. And it's the same thing with healing or the same thing with knowing. If I know and I believe in my heart of hearts that all things work together for the good of those who love the Lord and who are called according to his purpose, if I cognitively know that when I go through something, it does not mean that I don't go through it. It does not mean that I don't feel it. But sometimes that cognitive is enough. I got to know that that there's more, because all things work together for the good. So if all things work together for the good, I'm not sure how this car accident that totaled my vehicle is getting ready to work towards my good. I can't see it. This don't feel good. But I know in my mind, I know cognitively because I believe that thing. So if I believe that, then I'm going to hold on to that belief for all that I got, because I know it's got to be working for my good. And that gives me the boost that I need. And that gives me hope to keep going. Because if I don't keep going, I can't get to the what I need. I can't get to the working for my good. If I stop at if I stop at the thing that's trying to hold me back, of course the enemy is going to do things to try to hold you back. Why doesn't he?
That's his job.
That's his job. Exactly. Exactly. And if that's his job, he don't do his job.
I want to ask another question about, you talk a lot about trauma and faith. Do you believe that healing from trauma involves faith? Can you heal from trauma without faith, without belief?
So let me answer the first question. Do I believe that you
Okay.
can be healed from trauma with faith? Absolutely. And that's ultimately how I receive any level of healing in any of my traumatic space. And that is how I help people to experience healing in their traumatic space is, from a faith-based approach. Absolutely. Can you be healed from trauma without faith?
Without faith.
That is
Yeah.
that's a hard for me.
I mean, as a therapist, all your clients don't come in having a faith-based, a wealth of knowledge about who God is and how he heals.
Mhm.
Some of them, they come in, they're just hurting and they just want to heal. So how do you serve, or how do you provide services for that person who, I don't want to hear about the faith. I just want to stop hurting.
Yeah, yeah. And this is where the line gets liney for me, because as a clinical therapist, there are people that I am helping clinically, and there are some folks that need a diagnosis and appeal. There are some things that need a diagnosis and appeal. However, the Jesus in me says there are some things that need discernment and prayer. So and I'm not saying there are some things that are so heavy that I got to get this diagnosis and this pill before I could even get on the path to faith, get on the path to the next thing or whatever. Absolutely, 1,000%. And again, not against it if that's what is needed in real
Right.
life. And so I don't want to ever minimize, there's clinical depression. Yes, there are these clinical issues and diagnoses and all of those kinds of things. Absolutely, 1,000%. And I stand on faith. I stand on faith. I stand on God can heal. I stand on knowing and using biblical principles and all of those kinds of things. And yes, in clinical practices, there are times when I can't use those things because it's not appropriate to use those things.
Right.
But I will say, the ones that I'm able to use it with, baby, we be on a healing journey. And so, again, that's my method. And there are so many methods out there. There's so many things out there. And again, I can speak for myself in this space that I do believe that faith holds a huge part in it.
Okay.
And even you'll see now in the medical field and things of that nature, that there are more spaces where they are allowing faith and spirituality, because those are things that make people hopeful. Those are things that help people to move forward and things of that nature. So they ask you about it. What's your faith practices? What are those are things your doctor asks you that now. Whereas before it was just, here, take this pill. But now you've got a doctor who will say, well, what is your faith practices? What are you doing what are your spiritual practices? They'll ask you, are you involved in anything like that? So why are they asking those things? Because those things, they do make a difference, right?
They matter.
Yeah, so I'm not saying no. I'm not saying that you can't be healed without faith. I will never say that as a clinician, but I will say that faith helps that process along. It's the cheat code for me.
Okay. I like in some cases, and it depends on where you go to church or what denomination you are, where people have said the reason why you're not healed is because you don't have enough faith. Your faith is not strong enough. You haven't been praying enough. So you're not saying that because you don't have enough faith, you
No, no,
cannot
no,
be
no, no.
healed.
That faith helps in the process. Faith will anchor that process. And here's the thing. There are times when I didn't have enough faith, but there's a little story in the Bible about a man who had four friends that tore a roof off of a house to get him to Jesus. So he was able to get healed on somebody else's faith. So sometimes, yeah, we may not have enough, but if I'm surrounded by some folks who can pray for me, if I'm surrounded by some folks who will remind me what the word says, if I'm surrounded by some folks that will help me in that space, then sometimes that will aid in my faith and helping me to build my faith back up when my faith has failed me. So when I say it, I'm not saying, no, you don't have enough faith. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is that faith is a part of this process, and what is our expectation and who are we surrounding ourselves with that can help us in that process? Does that make
See,
sense?
now I have to put a plug. Yes, it does. I have to put a plug in for the Healing Collective because I believe healing really happens in community. If you have some folks that
Absolutely.
can help lift you and help build you, especially when you're in one of those critical trauma induced places, then you can heal. So, and like you said, you got to be careful who you surround yourself with because if you're around a lot of negative people who are not thinking about healing, who are not thinking about
Mm-hmm.
helping you, then chances are
Mm-hmm.
you will stay in that place of just
Yes.
being sick.
Yes. Yes. And so let's look at the reality of that. Let's look at the points of that and the need in that space. And again, it to me, again, I'm never pressing down on why somebody isn't healed or pressing down. No, I'm pressing on the other side of that. Like, let's get healed. Do you see what I'm saying? I don't want to look at the why. I mean, other than unless there's something that we're doing that's stopping us, if that makes sense. But other than that, like I'm not looking at the or blaming you for what we need to do to move forward. What's the forward motion here? That's it. So
Let's talk about the HOPE method.
okay,
Okay. And it begins with honest observation. How did you come to this HOPE method?
it was the Lord and my niece. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Okay.
So I love a good acronym because acronyms help me to remember. They've helped me to make sense
Remember,
of things and all
yes.
that kind of stuff. And that just worked for me. So I love a good acronym. And so my niece and I were talking one day and we were trying to, and so I was looking at words for hope. And so I'm like, here, like, how do we make what I do, like, how does it fit in this space? Because if I bring everybody hope, I do all of these things. And so we, the honest observation kind of came pretty quickly. And I'm like, but you got to do it. Like, how do we get the doing? And so my niece and I, we were talking, and so we were throwing the words around, and that was how we came up with practical execution. And so, yes, forever giving my baby some credit there. But again, the Lord, like we were just talking about what is the method, like how do we package this with what we already with doing, and that is one of the biggest things that I do as a therapist, even before like coming up with the hope method or knowing that we needed a hope method. It's like I have you take an honest look at yourself. Take an honest look at like what are you really doing? Like what is really happening in this space? Like not that you're the cause, not that you're the reason, not none of that, but also in like what we do has an effect on us. How we move has an effect on us. When we're stuck in some level of trauma and things of that nature, are you constantly revisiting the trauma? Are you constantly thinking about it? Are you not thought stopping? Are you whatever? Like take an honest observation, honestly look within. And so that's how I came up with honest observation. And then here's the part where people fall off. People will look at themselves all day long and they can even tell you, or they
Right.
may have the reason or, whatever. And then it's like, what's next? And so for me, it became this need for movement. And I told before there was a hope method, I would tell my clients, listen, I have a bias towards movement. I said, now my job as a therapist is to go with you and go at your speed. I said, and if you run, I'll run. If you'll walk, I'll walk. And if you sit still, I'll sit still, but not for long.
For a season.
Because
Yeah,
what
for a
I
season.
exactly. Because what I know is healing is in movement. Healing is in the action. What is the action that we need to do? And so practical execution is about the actionable steps to movement. If I want to turn a light on in this room, if I wanted to get to the door, I can't get to the door without getting up. See, sometimes we just have this thought like, oh, I just need to get up and I just need to get out the door. And then we get frustrated because we can't get to the door. And I'm just trying to get to the door. I'm just trying to get to the door. Well, did you get up? What's the next right move? What's the next step? What's the practical step? Because we'll have this big looming goal. And then when we don't get to it, that frustration that sets in because we haven't gotten to the goal. And it's because we haven't taken the first step. We haven't taken the first move. We may not have identified it. And so that's how I got to this space of practical execution. I used to ask the question, what's the next right move? And I thought, man, listen, when the Lord gave me that question, I thought I was doing some stuff. This was a decade ago. Man, what's the next right move? And so for a decade, I help people to get moving or get to the next step by saying, what's your next right move? And then just recently, the Lord revealed to me, probably within the last 6 months to a year, the Lord revealed to me, not what's the next right move, what's the next move? Because sometimes we get so stuck on trying to figure out what the right move is, and that right will hang us up. Just move. Now, I'm not saying just move in the wrong direction or whatever. We got to have some rationale why we doing the things or whatever, but to not let the right thing, because again, for a perfectionist, like myself,
Like yourself.
right?
Based
For a
on what I've read
perfectionist,
from your book.
right? Okay. People pleasing perfectionist person right here. But for a next right move, right? Like that right would catch me up because I'm like, oh, I don't know if it's the right move. What if it's not right? What if it's, and the Lord was like, if you move, we move. And I was like, so I was getting caught up with the right. So I'm not saying that it's wrong or anything like that. But
Right.
now it has evolved for me. Like, okay, so what's the next move? And I would say the next move would be if I'm trying to get to the door, I got to get up out this seat. No, for the next right move, I might just need to move my knees because I'm 40. so, so, okay. Bend your knees is the next move, right? That's the next move. It may not be a huge, jump step, whatever, but what's the next move? What's the next move to get you towards where you want to go? So that's what practical execution is about.
Yeah, and that's a good segue into my next question because you talk about choosing healing over being right. Now, can you share a personal example of how shifting your mindset created that sustainable momentum
Choosing healing over what's right.
over being right?
Huh? So that's exactly what I just talked about. Yeah, that was good.
Right.
Get that book back out.
It's being recorded, Dr. Joy.
But it's exactly what I was just saying. Like, because we can get caught up in it having to be the right way or the right thing or the blah, blah, blah. And when really we got to just make the move.
How did you get to that mindset? Personally, what happened that led you to the place where you're
Okay.
saying, you know what? It's enough of me trying to be right. I'm going to choose to heal.
Yeah. So ultimately, the biggest example that I can give you was when I was suicidal. Time of my life when I was done and I was tired and I was like, you know what? We're done here. And I can laugh about it now, but it wasn't funny, okay? It was really, and it was really a tough time. It was the dark time. It just was a lot happening. This was kind of right after like COVID had started and, you in the house all by yourself and just all the things. And it's like, woof, okay, there's a lot happening. I remember coming back from the dentist and I was like, Lord, I'm tired. And the way I felt standing, I felt it in the pit of my stomach. And I went and I looked in the mirror and I said, okay, you got to work through this and you can't do it by yourself. And also get these guns out the house because the reality is this, if they're here, you're going to think about it, right? And so I removed the firearms from my home. So that was when I chose the healing over I don't know what the right move is here. Like I didn't have it. I'm a full blown therapist. I ain't never had no suicidal ideations. And you get what I'm saying? And I love the Lord. Whole preacher out here, okay? Like just all the things. And I found myself in that space where I just was like, okay, we're here, but we're not staying here. Now I don't know what the next right move is, but I know what the next move is. We're gonna move these firearms out the house, and that was the very first move. And then we're gonna call somebody. And I called somebody and we have a conversation. And then from there things began to unfold. And that was choosing healing over right. Because right makes you feel like, well, you're a therapist. You should know what to do, or you should be able to get yourself out, or you're a preacher and you should be able to pray your way out. And you were and I'd have been still in the middle of that mess, feeling the way I was feeling, moving the way I was moving, trying to figure out what the next right move was. No, next right move is 1, 2, right? So that was choosing healing over, because what I didn't care what it looked like when I called the spiritual advisor and saying, hey, I don't know if I got enough faith for this. I didn't care what it looked like. I didn't care what right was at that time.
Thank you for
So
sharing that, because that's a real
absolutely.
experience. And it's a real experience for many of us who are both in the church, ministers, serving and doing the work, and our therapists trying to help people. And then how do we heal ourselves? And so, or have people surrounded that can help us to get to that place of healing. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Now, how do you reconcile the idea that your trials have made you? Do you believe we have to go through the trials in order to be a made person? And do trials and tribulations, do they really make us stronger?
Okay. Do I think you have to go through a trial to be a made person? I think you got to go through whatever the Lord make you go through. But I would prefer not having a trial. Absolutely. Give me the lesson in a book, okay? I don't have to go through the trial. But when you think about if you're going to be making, if it's going to make you or break you, I want it to make me, okay? So when there is a trial, I choose lesson from the trial, right? What's the lesson that I need to get from this? How do I need to move in this? What's the next what's the next move I need to make? What's the next step? And what am I really doing in this space? What am I really contributing to this space? Am I contributing to this space? Because we can contribute to that.
Expound on that. What do you mean contributing to this space in terms
We
of
can
healing
contribute
or
to
being stuck?
right. Either way, being stuck, healing, trauma, we contribute to a trauma space. So for instance, we'll use we'll use car accident. If I'm in a car accident, am I continuing to go back to the scene of? Am I continuing to fight in my mind? Did I do it right? What actually happened? Am I watching the video of it over and over? And I'm not saying to be avoidant in any way, but I am saying, is it helping? To what point is it a help or a hindrance? Right? Because sometimes the more you do it, we wind up contributing to like the fear of a thing. So, perfect example. I'm never going to take this way again. So then I become afraid of that particular intersection. True story. I'm afraid of this intersection because I had an accident at this intersection. So not afraid, not enough to do it. But now I tell the next person, they don't stop at this intersection. So be very careful at this intersection. So now I'm even contributing somebody else's fear on the subject. And the question then can be, okay, like what am I contributing to this space, this belief system, this thing? Or am I waking up every morning and saying, I am more than a conqueror and do what I need to do from that space? Am I saying that the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want? Am I feeding myself with that which helps me? Prime example. I had to stop so I love Criminal Minds, Law and Order, SVU, anything like that. NCIS, anything like that. Like, give me a marathon on Ion or wherever. Okay. And at some point, I had to stop watching them. I was able to watch them again after some time, but here's what was happening. I was feeling however I was feeling. I was having an emotional thing. Then I'm looking at everybody like they crazy because me and Stabler just solved this mystery the other day that was just like this. So so I'm contributing to this, but so at this point I was like, okay, I can't watch that right. It's too much, it's too real, it's too whatever for what's going on, and then I had to stop because like now, like it was consuming. The thought process was consuming. And so watching it was contributing to like whatever level of trauma or whatever the situation or the level of the extra emotional stuff, it was contributing to that. Now, when I got through that space, of course, I mean, at some point I was able to go back and, watch them again or whatever. But there was a period of time, like, I don't know, probably 6 months, where I was like, yeah, no, I don't want to watch nothing. I don't want to watch no SVU. I don't want to watch nothing that's talking about staying at home and in this house. Because I think it was during COVID when the shows started to kind of reflect COVID and stuff like that. Nope, I don't watch it too much. I don't, I can't. Because it was contributing to the feeling.
Right. And it goes back to that awareness, like being aware. Like you could have continued to do that if you were not aware that it was keeping you in this headspace where you were kind of breeding what I call breeding fear. And I think it's the awareness that helps us to move beyond our awareness helps us to move beyond our trauma. Because if you're of certain things. And I think about even TV, we will just sit for hours and watch TV and consume and not really aware that the stuff that we're looking at is having an impact on our mind and our thoughts.
Oftentimes folks can go for what feels like the easy way out. Therapy is not a one and done. Therapy is a process. I tell people when they give yourself 3 good months to go through the process, to use some of the methods, to start implementing these things, because you didn't get to this place overnight. You're not going to get out of this place overnight. Because therapy is the long game, right? When you're dealing with some of these issues or, whatever, any level of counseling or coaching, whatever, it's typically more of the long game. Now, you can easily go to a prescribing medical doctor or psychiatrist and say, hey, I've got major depressive disorder and I need a pill, and get the pill and, what you need or whatever. Therapy, yes, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay for it with time, with commitment, whereas one doctor's appointment and a copay on that prescription. And to me, that can be a beg for what you need if because sometimes we're over medicated, you know what I'm saying? So in the healing space, and when I say over medicated, we can get a diagnosis and a pill and a work note today. Like any doctor I go to will give you a diagnosis, a pill, and a work note. They will do that. But is that what I need? Or is what I need to work through this process to dig into myself and get to those things so that I can have the mindset shift, so that I can do something different. So yes, we'll buy what we want, but beg for what we need. So
our desires, our greater wants is a driving force for most people because we will go after what we want. We will move for what we want. But what we need is
think about it. Think about it in the process of we can talk about it in mental health. Sometimes analogies are better, but think about it. And this is no shade and no downer to anybody who has done this, because there are medical examples where this is necessary and it's important and it's helpful, because sometimes people just need help. But the weight loss thing, we got a weight loss phenomenon going on right now, right? Where people are getting weight loss shots and taking weight loss pills and getting surgery and all kinds of things, to body modification surgeries, all those kinds of things. Again, I don't think there's nothing wrong with any of it if it's in its right place. But here's what I'm going to say. If your mindset has not shifted before the surgery, after the surgery, you see, and then in this weight loss phenomenon, you see these people a year later and they gain all of this weight back. Now, not everybody, this is not an end all be all, but I will say, let's look at the statistics of it. Because the vast majority of people who experience a weight loss surgery gain the weight back within the first 2 years after losing it. The reality is, if the mindset has not changed, You have just bought what you wanted, and you've been skinny for a year because you spent. But what the need was, let's deal with, why are we overeating? Why do we have the negative relationship with food? Why are we moving the way that we move? Why do we act out of scarcity? Whatever those things are that have contributed to it. And again, that's why I said, and I don't want it to be end all be all, because there are people who need it, and that, like, I I had a conversation. I had a conversation the other day, and somebody was like, "Well, what like what is it? It's the same thing. It's like a Ozempic or the semaglutide. It's a shot. Essentially, but I'm saying the new shot. That's how. And again, like, people are on these, and there are people who need them. There are people. These are diabetic medications. There are people who are on them and are having those results because they need them, or whatever the case is. But I don't want to take my good kidneys and put them on it, because I don't know what's going to happen afterwards. My kidneys okay right now. So if I need to lose weight, and if that's a true desire, let's for real go get this gym membership instead of that Taco Bell last night. Because that same $12.59 I spent at the Taco Bell and Doritos on the DoorDash to be my $10 membership to the Planet Fitness. Like, what do I want? What am I saying that I want? What do I actually want? So that was a long, drawn out way, listeners, to say, to get to that place. Yeah.
I want to put another plug in for Leveraging Hope by Dr. Joy.
What I believe is what are you putting in? Are you, practicing firming language to yourself? Are you reading your Bible? Are you reading books and material of things that are meant to be helpful, like a Leveraging Hope? Not because I wrote it. I tell everybody, it's a really good book. Not because I wrote it. It's a really good book because I read it after I wrote it. And what I mean by that is, like, that is something that I put in me that comes out. It's those things that feed me. What time am I spending with my loved ones? What time am I spending doing things that that are good for my body? So exercising and getting out into fresh air. The more you do as habit, as ritual, like you said, as just your everyday life. I read this book. It is called Atomic Habits. I didn't even finish the book
I'm
initially.
familiar with it.
Right. So I read it, and then I listened to it on audiobook. I didn't finish with it initially because it was so much on how to build, like, regular everyday things. And that is, for me, that is the method that helps me in my faith. It's the regular everyday things that I put in. So, I'm not saying I don't listen to music that's not gospel, because I do. And so what I would encourage listeners and readers and anybody to do is put it in you on a regular basis. When you go walking as a regular everyday, I'm just going to get up, and part of my day is I'm going to go walking, not even so much for exercise. Your body just is in better shape because you walk more. You're somebody who walks more. Your knees work better. Your body works better, just because that's something you normally and or typically do. When I was working in corporate, I started taking the 6 flight of stairs instead of the elevator. And I did that because, like, I know I ain't going to take time to work out after work because I don't have time. I don't want to, whatever the case is. So I can just add this in. And what I realized after the first month of it, my legs were getting stronger. What I realized after, my calves were getting strong, what I realized is that I could carry more up than I could the first time. The first time I did that was like, whoo. What? But, but then it became the thing. But because of that, I had more stamina for stairs. So when there was an emergency and the elevator wasn't working, I ran them 6 flight of stairs before I could even think about it. I was on the 6th floor. But that wouldn't have been able to happen if I had not been doing it, because, again, the first time I did it, I thought, I was like, oh, these real steps. So the point I'm making it is, right. Doing a cute little paw on the stair. Go ahead. No, you go ahead. You go ahead. Please go ahead. Listen. But, once I got to doing, like, things regularly, so then it's simple. This ain't brain surgery. This is not rocket science. I started parking the furthest parking spot in the parking lot. The reason I parked that park, I drove a 2007 Saturn. I didn't care about that car. Wasn't about the car. Wasn't whatever. It was because those extra steps got me to, and then I got the steps up. And again, over time, it's called an accumulative advantage. I had an accumulative advantage of doing that extra movement. Again, you guys, readers, listeners, and all of those kinds of things, accumulative advantage. Just on your all time, whet your appetite for that which feeds you. The things that feed you are only ever going to sabotage or serve you. There are only two things that they can do. That's it. They're only going to serve or sabotage whatever the desire is. And so with that, I say, put more of the good stuff in. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to tell you this. So when I was, I'm on this weight loss journey. It's working okay. I see my face out here, and I see my little dimple. Okay. Right. Now here's the thing. I went vegan for about 18 months. It wound up correcting some stuff. It wound up working really, really well. It works well for me. And then I started doing other things or whatever the case is. And so now I'm primarily vegan.
Okay.
Because, now, what that means, that does not mean that I won't eat something that's not, because, and this is why I try not to claim anything, because I want to know that ain't vegan. I get it. But here's the thing.
Right.
Now, the cumulative effect over time, I put more good stuff in my body now than I do bad stuff. So what I see happening is, like, I'll drop a pound or two just because I've only ate salads. I may have only eaten, salads and vegetables this week or whatever the case is. That does not mean that on Sunday when my friends go to dinner, I'm not going. Of course I'm going to go, or whatever the case may be. But I had to do what worked best for me. And so for me, like you said, that programming what you put in, like, again, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm not going to eat something that's out of a vegan or pescatarian diet or whatever the case is. But I will say, what you'll see that I keep in my home, what you'll see that I put into my body, more times than not, it is good for me. And when I walked out of Home Depot earlier today, I did not get me the hot dog that I wanted, okay? I did not, because now is not the time. And I made a choice to serve my ultimate desires. Does that mean I will never eat another Home Depot hot dog? No, it means I made that choice today. And I'm going to try to make more and more and more and more and more of the good choices and have an accumulative effect, because when you make more and more and more of the bad choices, those have an accumulative effect. You read my book, I think I talk about the cookies in the book. I was eating 30 cookies a month. That's going to have an accumulative effect on you. So whatever you do will have an accumulative effect. So this is just a practical execution. Just try to do more.
Yes, and I was going to say that what you've been saying, it really is some practical steps. Just, not overly dressed up, just practical steps to help you change and help you to heal from trauma. And I love it.
Healing from trauma is always knowing that there is more. Whether you are at your highest high or your lowest low, there is more. And that's hope. That's hope. Knowing that there's more.
Joy, thank you so much. I know we're going to work together in some capacity in the future, and I hope you're open to it when it comes. But thank you so much for taking your time and your talent, and you are phenomenal.
Well, listen, if you know anyone who wants to read it, needs to read it, please gift it to them. And also, if you want to create some space where some people can go through it, I know the author. We would love for you to be able to do that and be able to tap into those spaces, with you all, if that's something you're interested in. So thank you so much for that.